So welcome everyone to this faculty event. My name is MJ and I'm part of the faculty team alongside with Stephanie Webster and Suresh Ghalsasi. We started the faculty event series because we have great professors at LBS. We believe that number one, they don't get enough appreciation for the brilliant work that they do. Number two, the students want to spend some more time, but in a less structured setting. So we thought we would address these 2 points by bringing you all together over a cup of tea to discuss a hot topic. And Stephanie, do you want to tell us what our hot topic today is?
As you all know, today's hot topic is how to make your first million, as crude and as cute as that sounds. Well, we will all have a 1-hour panel discussion. Then we'll have 30 minutes Q&A where audience members can ask the questions directly. Feel free to put in your questions in the chat. I'll be able to pick some of those as I go along. But yes, so we have an hour of panel discussion, then we have Q&A, and then after that, we will have breakout rooms where we split off and we'll put each of the speakers in a breakout room, and this creates a more intimate audience experience. And you can take breaks whenever you like. Why did we choose this topic? Well, actually, we didn't choose this topic. It was the students and the faculty community. So if you want to join our WhatsApp group, periodically we'll be putting in the link. We'll advertise it in the chat now and again. And it may come as a surprise, but a lot of students go to business school because they either want a higher paying job or they want to set up a business and make a lot of money. And yes, there are others who come for the delights of the Windsor alone, but the financial rewards are really a main draw for a lot of students. And actually, it's the financial rewards that form such a huge part of the MBA rankings. So to explore this topic and all the diverse perspectives around it, we invited 4 LBS professors from the Strategy and Entrepreneurship, our LBS career strategist, and an LBS alumni entrepreneur, and a non-LBS alumni entrepreneur, just to broaden our views on how to make your first million.
So let's introduce our panel and get going. You all have work and studies and families, so we respect the time you have taken out of your day to attend. We aim to bring value to our speakers and audience alike. Professors, I will start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourselves. We'll start with Professor Olenka, and then Brian, Professor Dominic, and Rupert, and that's it. And then we will go to Misha and Daniel and Paul. So Professor Olenka, please.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm happy to introduce myself. So hello, everyone. A lot of new faces, some familiar faces as well. So I'm delighted to see you all and meet you all virtually. So I'm Olenka Kacperczyk, and I'm an associate professor in the Strategy and Entrepreneurship Department. So just a little bit about myself. I guess what's distinct is that I lived in a number of different countries before coming to LBS. I was a professor at Sloan, MIT, and so probably because of that, I really got hooked into thinking about entrepreneurship and tech and the reasons why individuals actually become entrepreneurs. And then currently, I'm very much into understanding the consequences of those choices, both in terms of income, in terms of earning your first million, but also in terms of what it actually means for your life. And how does it affect things like work-life balance, even divorce rates. So I've been living and breathing entrepreneurship from sort of this more academic perspective. And so I'm super excited to share what I know with you guys today. Thank you for having me.
Professor Brian, please.
Great, thank you. My name is Brian Strobe. I am an assistant professor in the Strategy and Entrepreneurship Department here at LBS. And like Olenka, I recognize some faces as I've been teaching the core or tailored core for MBA students, first year entrepreneurial, developing entrepreneurial opportunities course here at LBS over the last couple of years. So I've had the privileged opportunity to work with hundreds of students and see dozens and dozens of entrepreneurial ideas and the entrepreneurial creativity of LBS students over the last couple of years. And I think part of this part of the excitement of entrepreneurship at a place like LBS, and part of the intrigue is, you know, a lot of you do have exciting before you come to LBS and have exciting career options lined up after leaving LBS. And so the decision to pursue an entrepreneurial idea may be slightly different than somebody who is coming at an entrepreneurial idea outside the traditional labor market options that some of you will have. So I look forward to chatting with you guys about this over the course of the seminar.
Great. Now, Professor Dominic Holder.
Very glad to be joining, and in many cases rejoining you all. So I'll give you a very quick sketch of my background and what I do at LBS. I'm an adjunct professor, as is Rupert, which means in my case, I spend about a third of my time doing things in, around and for the school, and about 2/3 of the time doing advisory work. I'm on a couple of boards, and until very, very recently, I was chairing our family company in Argentina, of all places, until selling it or completing the sale at the beginning of March 2020. Talk about dodging a number of bullets. And so background-wise, way back, I was where many of you are now, doing an MBA, in my case, at Stanford. Then followed a well-traveled path to strategy consulting with BCG. From there into the corporate world as a chief strategy officer for a big company, and then gradually got lured into the London Business School world. And along the way, depending on where we go, there are some stories of letting opportunities to make quite a bit of money slip through the fingers. And then sometimes those are the really interesting stories, by the way, what you wished you'd done, but then also we can bring things a little bit more up to date, and the adventures around that magic number still continue, among other things.
Great. So Professor Rupert Mason, please.
Thank you, Dominic, for half introducing me already. I'm adjunct faculty, which means I come from the outside world. I haven't got a PhD in anything. Indeed, my first degree was in English literature. And before that, I had yearnings to be a pianist. So my perspective has always been artistic. And I think that the arts have a lot to offer the way we should think about business that unfortunately we tend to dismiss from our thinking when we're at business school. But be that as it may, I shall air my prejudices later. I can't say I recognize anybody, but then I don't recognize my own children. So don't worry about that if I were you. Some of those names I do recognize. I hope I didn't fail you when you sat my course. If I did, please forgive me. Whatever I said in the course, I reserve the right to disagree with myself. So I'll say something entirely fresh and new today, I hope. Just don't point a finger at me and say, you didn't say that last time we meet, because I'll disagree with myself next time we meet as well. That's me.
Great. That was great. Thank you, professors. And now we can hear from Misha, followed by Daniel and Paul. Misha, can you please start?
Thank you very much for having me on this webinar. It's a really interesting and very catchy name to the topic, how to make your first million. And so I'm going to speak from my perspective, and I can only do that, which is, it doesn't have quite so much of a materialistic spin on things. It's really got to do with mindset and the sort of spiritual attitude and philosophy to not just your business life, but to life in general. When you get your life right and you get your mindset right, everything else in your life can work well, and you can achieve success in all manner of ways in your life. And that's really what I'm going to offer today. It's my perspective.
Daniel?
Thank you very much for having me on the call. I grew up in Australia. I went to university and was lured away to join a startup when I was about 19 years old. And it went from, it was a very fast growth startup. About 2 years in, I left that startup to go and start my own company and go in competition with the company that originally employed me. And within about 3 years, we grew to about 11 million in revenue. I exited that business, came to the UK, set up another business here for a few years. before setting up a business accelerator. Today, we have a business accelerator that was founded in 2010. We've had about 3,000 companies globally go through the business accelerator. Many of them have gone from 0 to over 1 million. In my own personal business career, I've had businesses that have gone from 0 to 1 million, businesses that have achieved 1 million of profit. And depending on what we mean by 1 million, whether it's revenue, profit, or valuation, we can go off in those different categories.
So, $1 million question: how to make your first million? Let's start with Misha. So, Misha, how do we make our first million?
Thanks, Suresh. So this is a really interesting topic for me, and I look back to the way I came to LBS and the situation that I was in. I started my MBA program in 2010, and I came out of a situation of a couple of career transitions. Actually, I left working as a junior doctor in the NHS. I realised that that wasn't the career path for me, and I then went to work in my family business, which was a medium-sized pharmaceutical company. I also realised during my work there that that wasn't for me either. And I came to LBS really to find out what I wanted to do with my life and my career going forwards. I felt, if I'm brutally honest, very low and depressed at that point. I also felt pretty lonely and trapped within the situation that I was in. But also I was desperate to succeed and not let my life be a series of career transitions. And I really wanted to find something that made my heart sing and made me want to go to work in the morning. And so I toyed with various ideas. When I went to LBS, I thought about healthcare consulting, opportunities in the life sciences area and in the financial sector. But what really stood out for me was entrepreneurship. And I look back at the time around graduation, which is when I set my first business up, Fontus Health, with my husband and 3 other business partners. And we really had very little money. I mean, we actually spent all of our savings on starting up that business, which wasn't very much. And I just look at that situation now in somewhat in horror, because that was such a huge risk. But equally, I was at the very bottom. I had hit rock bottom in my life, and I really was desperate to prove to myself that I could do it, but also prove to the people around me who were telling me that this is really not going to happen for you. And I think what got me out of that situation was that desperation and that self-belief that I could do it. And if I look at my situation now, having had some success, there is no way that I would spend all of my savings on setting up another business, because I just don't have that desperation that I did back then. And I'm happy to sort of go into more detail about that later if you'd like me to, but that's my background.
I think you raise a very interesting point, Misha, about the comfort zone and the fear and how we're stuck in a situation. And I'm going to come on to you, Dominic, because you've had a very different road into your thoughts around this. And also we sent some questions to all of the speakers before we started this week, and there was a question that you liked in particular. Do you want to expand on that and your thoughts on what Misha just said?
So there was one question which really struck me. In fact, there were nine questions circulated. There was a question about risk aversion and risk appetite, which struck me personally when I was reflecting on this, because way back, I did have an opportunity to make $1 million quite early, because I'd started out my career after undergrad with Swire Group. Those of you who know Asia will know Cathay Pacific, which is the publicly visible part of Swires. And I jumped ship from Swires to go to business school when I was in my mid-20s. And then went down the well-trodden path to Boston Consulting Group, strategy consulting. But the Swires wanted me back, and I got offered the opportunity to, at the age of 29, to run a rather struggling company they'd acquired in North California. Sir John Swire said, if you meet these performance targets in a couple of years, we'll give you $1 million. And a round-the-world first-class ticket on Cathay Pacific. Now, this really is a story against myself, because when I look back, I think, how different life might have been. Actually, I'm very happy now with the way it's been, but I'd been with BCG for 2 years, doing a lot of analysis. And I'd been at Stanford for 2 years, doing a lot of analysis. So you know what I did when presented with this opportunity? I analyzed it. We didn't quite have PowerPoint in those days, but I made the equivalent of a PowerPoint deck to myself. And then I went to show it to Sir John Swire, who gave me a look, and he said, "I don't think you really want this job, do you?" And so there is a little bit of a kind of warning bell in there, perhaps to all of us. This might resonate with you, Daniel, and the choices that you made, which is there can be a big danger for us over intellectualizing business. And I'm thinking of one of my former students on the full-time MBA program from some years back, very, very talented guy who struck out from one of the big four to become entrepreneurial. And he reminded me of me because he was doing loads of analysis again. And one of the investors we went and spoke to, because I was helping him with the pitch together with one of the ex-deputy chairman of Deloitte, as it happened. And this guy, who's a governor of LBS, said, "You're a consultant, you're not a CEO." And that rang all kinds of bells. So I think one message, whether or not we're talking about the $1 million, or back to you, Misha, whether we're talking to really embracing any of the things that we'd really love to be in life, we perhaps need to step back just a little bit if we've got very used to intellectualizing and analyzing. Because, you know, when I think back, what a gift horse to look in the mouth. Later, I repented of this and decided to turn around a company in Argentina. And most of my friends and nearly all of my London Business School colleagues said I was absolutely crazy to entertain the thought. And after 10 years of a roller coaster ride in that Wild West environment, we finally achieved the exit. There's another story in there which might be relevant later. I would never, ever have been able to do what I did in Argentina without the London Business School alumni community. Even at the most basic level, you're thinking of hiring a general manager. Is the guy going to steal from you? That's where, even at that most basic level, having friends, and I believed, by the way, that my former students were not going to rip off their old professor, and I was well warranted in that belief. So I couldn't have done that without a network. But you need the kind of network that will encourage, rather than a network that will, say, consultants that will remind you of the risks.
I think
that was just around one question, Stephanie.
Yes, and we'll come back to you for more. So Daniel, do you want to do a quick response, and then we can go to Alenka after that, and then after that Rupert, if that's okay? So Daniel, what do you have to?
Yeah, so I was probably really young and stupid with my first business. I had this incredible opportunity at a startup, and I was employee number 3. We grew to 60 people in 2 years, and I went to my boss and I said, "Look, I've been with the company since the beginning. Can I please have some shares in the business?" And he said, "If you want shares in a business, go start your own business." And I kind of just thought about it and went, well, maybe, I think he was saying that as a way of kind of trying to hammer the point that I was not ready to be a shareholder of a company. And I took it to mean maybe I should go and do that. So I went off and I started up a business in competition. And basically, in my role with this company, I'd been placing advertising in newspapers for about $7,000 per ad on the company credit card. And one of the things I did before thinking terribly hard about it was I went and placed an ad in the newspaper on my personal credit card for $7,000, which I had no real way of paying for unless it actually generated leads and made sales. And very rapidly, I was in over my head. So I had a credit card and I'd been putting company expenses on it, and they'd upped my limit to $23,000 or something like that. And I just went and started the company on my credit card, and I had 50 days to pay it back, or else I would be in serious trouble at 22. So I got myself very stupidly over my head with less than 2 months to pay back a credit card, and then no sooner had money come back in, I cleared the credit card and then maxed it out again. So I was the opposite. No analysis, no slide deck, no thinking, just pure stupidity of a 22-year-old.
Well, I'm not sure about that, Daniel. I think it was quite inspired. Alenka, you've seen so much from all over the world. What's your take on what Daniel and Dominic are saying?
All right. Well, what I wanted to add to the conversation, I guess one of the questions that you guys sent around was whether it perhaps makes sense to stay inside an established firm rather than becoming an entrepreneur. And so this is something that really struck a chord in me because I'm actually someone who grew up in an entrepreneurial family. And because of that, because I was constantly exposed to it, my dad is an entrepreneur, my sister is an entrepreneur, everyone is an entrepreneur, I grew up and I decided I don't want to have anything to do with it. And the reason is that entrepreneurship can be great and we all romanticize it. And if it goes well, it's amazing, right? You make your first million. But, well, the truth is that there's also huge risk. And if we actually look at the data, the median return to entrepreneurship is negative. And the variance is huge. And on the top of it, you're just leaving the safety of an established firm that can just provide you anything you want. And by the way, if you fail within an established firm, right, no risk for you. And so I grew up seeing all of that, people just leaving their careers behind to fulfill their dreams. And so once I grew up, I thought, well, I really want to understand, why did they do that? Why didn't they just stay within an established firm? And is that even an option? And so a large part of my academic research is precisely about that, right? It's about understanding what are the benefits that we often romanticize and we often think about. Becoming a founder, it all feels great, but also what are the costs of being an entrepreneur and what do you give up? And are you ready to do that? And so essentially, just to share a little bit with you, both my research and kind of my personal take is that, well, you should be very demanding of yourself when deciding whether or not to enter entrepreneurship. You should subject that decision to very stringent tests, because the truth is, again, as I said, and my research actually shows that as well. So on average, it's gonna be very hard to make any money. Also, I found in my own research that if you're looking for non-pecuniary benefits, think about flexible work arrangements or maybe a more stable family situation. My research shows that unfortunately is not gonna happen. You're gonna work all the time, way more than in paid employment. You're gonna have a higher rate of divorce, higher risk of divorce. And on the top of it, there's even some evidence in research that entrepreneurs actually take on, they turn to drugs because it's just so stressful, right? So this is not at all to discourage you guys. I guess what I want to emphasize, I hope you don't all leave. So I spend a lot of time thinking about the alternative, a safer way to do it. And I'm more than happy to spend more time talking to you about this. So working as an intrapreneur, something that we rarely think about, right? And yet it's actually quite common these days too. And so what I found studying multiple people over many, many years in different industries is that actually there's multiple ways to do it, and some of them do not have to be as risky. You can be a founder and then re-enter paid employment, do it under a much safer scenario, or you can just even start as an intrapreneur, get the resources from the organization, right, and still have the same autonomy, the same independence, the same level of discretion and autonomy, even within and inside the firm. So just to summarize, I guess I am planning to be a little bit of a skeptical voice in this conversation. I love founders, I love entrepreneurship, but I also think that it requires really careful thinking before one makes the jump and commits and is really ready to incur all these different costs.
And I love skeptical professors. So this is fantastic.
Well, you have landed me for sure.
No, and the thing is, your voice will echo throughout the audience. There'll be many who have that view as well, who are scared to take that first leap. But Rupert, you are not one of these people, right? I can't.
No, I'm not. After doing English literature, I did chartered accountancy. And you know, I once, as a partner in the accounting firm, we did a marketing campaign or two, selling ourselves to entrepreneurs as the entrepreneurial firm of accountants. And I remember at a conference, some guy saying to us, with some anger in his voice, look, we as entrepreneurs don't want our accountants to be entrepreneurial. We want them to understand entrepreneurs, and that's different. We don't come to you because you're entrepreneurial. We come to you because you understand entrepreneurs. So it's my turn to stand up next. I said, well, look, I'm a chartered accountant. I understand entrepreneurs, but I'm not entrepreneurial. Indeed, as a chartered accountant, I'm probably about as entrepreneurial as a vicar in the Church of England. At which point some bloke stood up at the back of the room and said, look, I have bought and sold 3 businesses. I've made a lot of money myself, and I'm also a priest in the Church of England. From which I can conclude that it's very difficult for us to generalize about the subject that we're talking about. And in response to Dominic's concern that we should be careful about over-analysing, can I put the contrary view? We should also be very careful about over-generalising. And indeed, if we do run the risk of over-analysing, at least we might get to the particular that we are and the particular circumstance that suits us. Anyway, going back to the question that was asked, you know, and we seem to be morphing into a discussion about a connection between making your first million and being an entrepreneur. Well, I'm very grateful for Alenka's stat there, which is generating a bit of noise in the chat box as well, about whether it's a mean or a median, or whether it's, we can all agree that it's negative. But from that, I can conclude that, look, if you want to make your first million, don't become an entrepreneur. You know, I can name you lots of people who make $1 million every year. You know, look at the partners in Magic Circle law firms. They make £1 million profit share every year. So how do they make their first million? Well, they become a partner and then make it again the following year and the following year and the following year. I think we're sort of missing the point here about why it is that people go into entrepreneurship. And I think if you go into entrepreneurship to make your first million, you might well suffer from Alenka's statistic. Certainly if you are an LBS grad, for whom your alternatives are so significant, you can make a lot of money and have an intellectual and rewarding career elsewhere without going through the pain, agony, and grief of entrepreneurship. Now, you do entrepreneurship because you have to, because you want to to create, because you're compelled to. If at the end of the day you make your £1 million, well, great. But that's not why you do entrepreneurship for. If you want your money, go and do something else. There's a better way, an easier way of getting it. If you are one of those people for whom entrepreneurship is almost a vocation, in other words, you have no choice other than to do it, then you're not going to need the $1 million to motivate you to do it. You know, one of my clients, successful creator and seller of several businesses, has, the last time I met him, at least in his office, he has behind him on his wall what he calls his qualifications. And if you look closely at his qualifications, so a load of framed certificates. And Daniel, these are not academic qualifications. If you look very carefully, you see that all of these qualifications, so-called, are actually P45s. And those of you who don't know what a P45 is, it's the certificate you get when you get fired or you leave somebody's employment. And he said, look, there's dozens of these things. Every time I get grumpy about running my own business, I turn around and look at my qualifications. And I say to myself, I'm not qualified to do anything related to employability. I have to run and create businesses for myself. I've tried employment. It doesn't work for me. It's not about money. There's another compulsion that is going on there. And I think that's the most important point to remember. Now, arguing the flip side, just very briefly before we pass on, if you do the stats, and I haven't done it, but I'd hazard a guess that if you do the stats, odds on you're going to stand a better chance of making $1 million by being an entrepreneur than by doing the national lottery or doing premium bonds or by gambling one way or the other. But that doesn't increase the odds that much, does it? And then my final note on this subject is back to the vicar in the Church of England. One figure I do quote at my students in the classroom is that in The Economist a couple of years ago, it was cited that entrepreneurs statistically are more likely to pray every day than non-entrepreneurs. I think there's a lesson there for us that's perhaps the subject of another study, but that's enough for me for the moment.
Rupert, thank you very much for that. Thanks, yeah. So Brian, please help me. You say it isn't so. Say the statistics aren't true. Are they right? Are they wrong? What's going on? Do I need to become an entrepreneur in my own company? What's going on?
Fortunately or unfortunately, I would say I second everything that's been said so far, and I think it's really important to think about these things in a honest and open way as you make these kind of career decisions. But to do that, so I'm not going to add anything new to what's been said, but rather try to unpack a little bit about maybe some of the reasons for why this stuff might be true. The first is related to what Dominic and Daniel were talking about in terms of analysis, doing too much analysis, doing too little analysis, and trying to think about why analysis is so useful and why we're so good at it in business schools and why it's appropriate in so many settings, but why in entrepreneurship that might not translate perfectly. And one reason for this is the nature of being entrepreneurial is really around the amount of uncertainty that it involves. And analysis works really well if you have good data, you have good inputs to that analysis. You can sit down and you can generate output from the analysis that's reliable. The challenge is in entrepreneurship, oftentimes you're trying to do something new, so that analysis just won't be as valuable or as useful as it would be in other settings. And so that brings me to Alenka's summary, which I won't rehash here, but I think it's super important to take a look at these studies that Alenka has mentioned that she has been doing herself as well, and think about how you respond to this if you still have a desire to be entrepreneurial. And one thing to consider is if failure of some type is the typical outcome. So most entrepreneurs are definitely not going to be, or the average entrepreneur is not going to become this this romanticized version that we see in the media. Then the goal really becomes how to be entrepreneurial in a more efficient way. And if you start with the premise that most entrepreneurial attempts are going to be failures, then the question is really around how do you increase the chance of success, but also reduce the cost of failure? Because failure is not necessarily a problem if the cost of that failure is low relative to what the opportunity cost of your time at that stage of your career. And so then you can think about and there's actually been a decent amount of research over the last few years, and a lot of you will be familiar with some of these frameworks, such as the Lean Startup, which are designed to put emphasis on thinking about the entrepreneurial process itself rather than the entrepreneurial outcome. And obviously these two things are related, but they are slightly different than the way you would think about that inside a big company, or how a big company would take risk. And I think this gets back to this ties back into the analysis point, in the sense that you can do a lot of analysis. Two things are required to answer this big question that has been laid out by the organizers today. One is you have to create some value and you have to capture some value. The problem, you can't capture value if you haven't created value, and I totally agree with Rupert here. I think you got to focus on creating value. The problem is most entrepreneurs think they're creating value, and then they find out actually there was nobody who valued what I was trying to create here. And one thing to consider then is that the earlier you can find that out, the better. Because if we look at success or failure at the individual level rather than the idea level, you might need to try 2 or 3 or 4 or 20 ideas before you find one that works. And that's okay, as long as you didn't spend too much effort, too much time, too much money finding out that idea 1 wasn't going to work, so that then you're out of resources and you can't actually try idea number 2 and number 3. So I just want to kind of expand people's frame of reference here. Instead of thinking about the outcomes, think about the process of entrepreneurship and how we might focus on that in order to create more value, in order to do the appropriate amount of analysis, in order to judge the appropriate amount of risk in terms of what you're willing to do in your careers.
I love that, Brian. And you also offer mentoring, right? I believe to different students. You've been a mentor in your past.
All the faculty at LBS will offer mentoring. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So thank you very much for that. And before we just get some resolution from Misha and Daniel, so I'm going to go to Paul. So Paul, you actually introduced the words to me of entrepreneurship. So that was new to me. So we'll cover that. We'll cover a step-by-step guide from a career point of view, and then we'll put that aside, go to Suresh, who's going to look after the entrepreneurs in the room, and actually get a step-by-step from Misha and from Daniel. So Paul, from a career aspect, are there certain functions that lend themselves more to being financially lucrative?
Yeah, I think there are. I mean, look, there's some well-trodden paths for certainly the executive MBA and probably the MBA. A lot of people want to go into consulting. They want to join one of the big consulting firms. And if you become a partner in one of these big consulting firms, you're probably on your way to earning $1 million plus. And I would say that's quite an entrepreneurial career. You're using the firm's resources to make money for the firm. In the sense that most of the partners, one of their primary functions is to develop business, is to win business, win new clients for the organization, to be the sort of the meat eater, the red meat eating hunter going out to find business. And you'll find the same model applies in the law firms. I think as Rupert mentioned, the magic circle law firms, they're earning $1 million plus, no problems. Same in other advisory type firms. Look at the big four: Deloitte, KPMG, PwC, EY. The partners there are earning 700, 800K plus. So these are good careers to earn decent sums of money. I think a lot of that is about being entrepreneurial. As I said, using corporate resources to build a business within a business. I guess moving to the advisory route, as well as private equity as well. I mean, private equity is quite risky, right? There's a lot of risk there. But if you're a partner over a period of time, you can earn a lot of money in private equity. Again, it's another really well-trodden career path or a desire for LBS MBAs and MBAs. I think, if you want to have a corporate career, I think, there comes this point about risk. Staying in your lane, working your way up within a corporate ladder can also be a very good way to earn very good sums of money. I think the median salary for a chief executive in the FTSE 100 is 1.64 or 1.66 million pounds, and a load of benefits on top of that. For the FTSE 250, the median salary for a CEO is 1.3 million pounds plus benefits. CFOs earn very good sums of money, as well as other board directors within the FTSE 250. So these are other really good ways of fairly, I'm not saying they're risk-free, but it's not as risky as being an entrepreneur, working within an organization.
I've got to disagree with that a little bit. By definition, you're talking about the top 350 executives in the country, which is statistically rare. There's 6 million businesses in the UK.
Plus the boards on top of that as well.
So my question, let's take a entrepreneur's perspective, and I have same question to Daniel and Misha. Same question. Let's see if they have different perspective. My mentor tells that if you want to make million, then first you need to find $1 million problem, and then you have to find $1 million solution. And where do I start?
Yeah, so I disagree with that. I think you can make money in a whole host of different ways. And that can be from the most mundane idea that might just so happen to be a cash cow generating sort of business. I know a chap who has a ball bearings business. I mean, it must be probably one of the most boring careers on the planet, but he makes a very good living for himself by selling these ball bearings. On the other side, you've got, you could have, the next new innovation in healthcare or in tech, and eventually make a lot of money that way. You can make money in any way you want. I think what is universal though is having the right mindset, that commitment and that diligence. but also not to be purely focused on that monetary figure. Being solely focused on the money will only get you so far. And actually what you really need are tools to enable you to get yourself through some really gritty, difficult times in your business, and that you're going to face. We'll face them in life, and we'll certainly face them on an entrepreneurial path if we choose that. But also equally, you'll face that in the corporate world if you're climbing the ladder in a big firm, big law firm or accounting firm, whatever that may be. You've got to find meaning and purpose in your life. And I think what is also really universal is being able to understand fear. I think a lot of people don't really want to acknowledge fear. And fear is a very normal part of life. I mean, we need it to be human. It is there to protect us in some way. And it's the body preparing itself for something outside of its control or uncertainty. And actually, when you harness it, when you rationalize it, when you really take a good hard look at it, you're then able to use that to your advantage, and then decide, do I want to take a risk or not? And I'm not saying be reckless. You've got to take calculated risks, and these decisions have to be made based on sound judgment and good reasoning. But once you have decided and you are honest with yourself whether this business is really has legs and is going to go forward, and made the necessary tweaks to your business plan, then you should, if you've got that risk-taking appetite, then you should go for it. And you've got to be self-reflective and honest with yourself about that.
Daniel, do you have different perspective, or you want to add anything?
I feel like I have to lurch and make a case for entrepreneurship. It's feeling a little bit like everyone's warning us off this thing. $1 million's not that hard. $1 million is about 20 grand a week for 50 weeks of the year. 20 grand a week isn't that hard. It's, if you sell something that's 5 or 10 grand, you make a couple of sales a week and you're on $1 million of revenue. If you grow your team and develop a team from, there are some tricky parts. There's definitely some tricky parts in scaling a team and developing a team, but $1 million of revenue is not that hard. Getting to $1 million of profit normally means that you get about $5.5 million of revenue, and you have about 15 to 20% margins, and you have a team of about 40 people. So that's the parameters that you're kind of working with when it comes to putting together a business that makes $1 million a year. And realistically, if you're a partner in a law firm or a partner in an accounting firm, you are essentially running about a 40 or 50 person team. You're running in many cases, you're running a 10 to 20 million pound book. And you've got to do all the same stuff an entrepreneur might do. Only problem is you end up with the pressure of being a partner in a law firm or an accounting firm, which means you got to fit in and do it all their way and fly the flag and be the brand and wear the tie. So if you're a bit of a rebel, it's unlikely that's. It's also, by the way, it's also statistically rare. KPMG's got 17,000 employees in the UK and 600 partners. So you're talking about something that's also statistically rare. I'm quite, of course it's difficult, but it's actually not that hard. To have £1 million of equity as an entrepreneur often involves just selling or raising your first decent round, where you might raise £250,000 for 10%, which actually can be done with a slide deck and some good people on the team. And suddenly you've got more than $1 million of equity value. Of course, it doesn't end there. That's the beginning of the story. But I just feel like I've got to lurch and kind of make a little bit more of a case that entrepreneurship's not that hard. And, I've got friends of mine who are Olympic athletes, and they train for 4 years to have a crack of being in the top 3 fastest people on the planet. And they dedicate themselves to this, insane idea of being in the Olympics, and they get depressed when they get a silver or a bronze. And I think to myself, that to me sounds very risky compared to entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, they're giving out gold. By that comparison, they're giving away gold medals every day. I guess I guess I've got to be a bit cheeky and say that that there are plenty of ways to do it. It's statistically rare that you would be in an airplane, but it's not that hard to be in an airplane.